Today we are going to be ranking championship squads from the youngest to oldest in the championship, and I think this gives us some interesting findings about each of the sides in the league, and I'd like to get your guys' verdict on this one down below. Now, for me personally, I'd always edge to the side of wanting a slightly more youthful squad, as obviously with that you then get the chance to have some more saleable assets, developing some younger players coming up through the ranks. But it is also worth mentioning that with age also comes experience, and that can also massively play into your favour as well. For example, last season the youngest average age of the championship squad was Barnsley at 23.1 years old, and they were ultimately relegated. As always guys, if you do go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like on today's video and do stick around and subscribe for some regular championship content. But without any further ado, let's jump into this one. So we'll be putting all 24 of the championship clubs into this following tier list. We've ordered it by ages, so we've got the just above 24 age, we got plus 25, plus 26, plus 27 and plus 28 as well for those older squads in the championship. We'll start out with the youngest team currently in the championship, and that award goes to Swansea City, whose squad has an average age of just 24.1 years old. If you are to look throughout that spine of that Swansea squad, which does start week in, week out, the vast majority of those players are sort of in and around the low 20s, and I think that's been the general way in which Swansea have been recruiting over these past few windows. Yes, there has been the odd exception to that. I think Jamie Patterson's just hit 30 now. Joe Allen was a bit more of an experienced head that was brought into this group as well, but generally speaking, this Swansea group is a very young bunch, and I think they've got a lot of potential to grow as a team, and also they've got plenty of saleable assets in there as well, which they can sell them for a profit. Next then we've got Sunderland, who are also coming in with an average age of 24.1 years old. Obviously this squad ranking does include loans that are currently playing within your team. Obviously Sunderland have been one of those championship sides to have played the loan market really well, but once again, looking throughout the spine of that Sunderland squad, it is a young bunch of players, especially the way in which they recruited in this recent summer transfer window. They were going down that youthful look to go ahead and bolster up their squad, and I think they've generally done a good job of that. A lot of players coming through the ranks at the moment with a hell of a lot of potential at Sunderland. Blackburn have done a really good job of keeping their squad fresh and young over the years, and they're also going into this bottom category, also having one of the youngest squads in the championship at just 24.1 years old on average. Blackburn arguably currently boast one of the best youth setups in the championship, do a great job of progressing players through the youth ranks there at Rovers, and then going ahead and giving them opportunities in the first team as well. Also, generally looking at the players in which they've profiled and gone on to sign, generally they're in that sort of young 20s sort of mould. Look to get those players in, develop them on, and ultimately sell for a profit. So that's something that Blackburn have done really well, and perhaps a reason why they always tend to start the season quite well and fade towards the end. Maybe it is that lack of experience which haunts them a little bit. And then the last team going in that 24 plus category is actually Blackpool, coming in with an average age of 24.5 years old. Blackpool actually have done really quite a good job with lowering the average age of their squad quite considerably actually from last season. They've lowered it by a whole year in terms of the average age of that entire squad. Obviously a route which Michael Appleton tends to go down in terms of investing into young players. Appleton always seems to have quite good links to the loan market as well. That's something that Blackpool explored quite a bit throughout the summer transfer window, and I think in the long run this will serve a club like Blackpool really quite well actually. When you want one of the big fishes in the championship in terms of having those resources of some of the parachute teams, you need to get a little bit more creative with your recruitment, and generally speaking some of the younger players that Blackpool have on the books, I think that's applicable to them. With an average age of 25.2 years old, we then have QPR going into the category above them. They've done a miraculous job with lowering the average age of their squad. Last season QPR had the 5th oldest squad in the championship, and this season they've got the 5th youngest squad in the championship, which takes some doing. Last season's age numbers would have been quite influenced by the likes of David Marshall, Kieran Westwood, who are both in that older 30s category, who both came in on short-term deals because of their goalkeeper crisis. But a lot of older heads that QPR let go over the summer, they've gone ahead and reinvested a lot of that into a younger model, and generally looking at their squad, it is one of the brightest and upcoming groups we've probably got in the Championship at the moment. Coming in with an average age of 25.3 years old, we then have Hull City. Been a little bit of a topsy-turvy season for Hull up until this point, but generally speaking with them, they've got quite the track record when it comes to developing youngsters as well, and going ahead and selling them on at a profit. The most recent two examples being Jarrod Bowen and Keane Lewis-Potter. Also with an average age of 25.3 years old in the squad, we then have Cardiff City, who come into this category as well. Cardiff done a really good job, especially in the more recent transfer windows, at going ahead and lowering the average age, particularly when it was McCarthy in there a couple of years ago. Cardiff squad did rank amongst the oldest in the Championship. A lot of older heads in there back then, but as a result of their recent clear out, got a lot of those up off the books and invested into some younger players. Stoke have an average age of 25.4 years old. It's quite the blend that they've got in their squad in terms of youth and experience. A lot of them in the teenager age range. They've also got quite a few in their younger 20s as well. But on top of that, there are quite a few seasoned pros in there. You know, thinking of the likes of your Nick Powells, your Dwight Gales, your Aidan Flints, and particularly Phil Jagielka, who will be seriously bringing up the average age of this squad, as he's at 40 years old now. But a lot of youngsters also in there to go ahead and balance that out. Norwich are also coming in with an average age of 25.4 years old. Generally speaking, looking at their past campaigns in the Championship, they've always been quite dependent actually on young stars coming through the ranks, and done a really good job over the years as well at selling them at a profit. Thinking back to, you know, the Murphy twins, James Maddison, Ben Godfrey, countless examples of players that have really developed their game at Norwich over the years. And even looking at some of the youngsters in amongst the squad at the moment, that doesn't seem to be changing. I think Vincent Kompany was keen to have a blend of youth and experience with his squad. They're coming in with an average age of 25.6 years old. Been really impressed actually with Burnley so far this season, and especially with Kompany, with how quickly he's been able to knit together this really quite cohesive system, considering how many new players are coming in. Not just new players, but new players new to the country and to the Championship especially. But yeah, they've done quite well to bring down their average age of their squad from the Premier League last time. Middlesbrough have an average age of 25.7. I think that when you look throughout their squad, the majority of that spine are sort of in that mould where they are in their mid sort of 20s, and that's reflected with the average age of their squad at the moment. The Birmingham squad ranks with an average age of 25.8 years old. Impressively enough, last season Birmingham actually had the second oldest squad in the Championship, and so they've done quite the job to go ahead and quite drastically lower the average age of this group. Now, don't get me wrong, there are still plenty of older heads in there, you know, your Djukovic's, your Troy Deeney's, your John Ruddy's as well, but with those older heads, they've also more recently gone ahead and invested into some younger players, thinking how well the likes of, you know, Trusty's done so far, Chong coming back in, Hannibal as well on top of that. And I think that was a conscious effort by Birmingham and John Eustace really to go ahead and lower the average age of that squad. It served them very well so far this season, and on top of that as well, you've also got the Birmingham Academy, which has also served them really well over the years as well. After that, we then have Huddersfield Town also coming in with an average age of 25.8 years old. You can see quite a few Championship clubs being bulked up into this category here. Huddersfield, another side like Birmingham, who have that mix within the squad at the moment between those older heads and some of those more younger players that are coming through that they're looking to develop. And then the last team making it into this category, we then have my team, Preston North End, coming in with an average age of 25.8 years old. It is an interesting area, this one. In years gone by, I think that Preston have done a really good job of having quite a youthful squad coming up together, and something that maybe we've been a little bit more neglectful in recent times is trying to invest in some of those younger players, you know, those up-and-coming players that we can probably invest our time and resources into to then go ahead and sell at a profit. But we still rank amongst probably around about the middle of the road as things stand in terms of average ages within the Championship. I think that when you look within that Preston spine, a lot of our players currently being in that mid-20s mould. Next then, with an average age of 26.1 years old, we have the Watford squad. It's an interesting one with Watford because they probably have some of the most upcoming and promising players in the Championship, with the likes of Asprilla and João Pedro especially, but within that, it is quite an older, edged team, really, looking at those more experienced pros who are within that Watford side, a lot of them being sort of towards the late 20s, early 30s as well. But within the more recent transfer window, there was an attempt to go ahead and invest in some younger talent, the likes of Keenan Davis coming in, Hamza Chowdhury as well, amongst others. Bristol City also sharing that with Watford, with an average age of 26.1 in their squad at the moment, and once again quite applicable to what I was saying about Watford then. Bristol City also having some of the most promising upcoming youngsters in the Championship at the moment, but dotted within that squad are also quite a few older heads, which will go ahead and bring up that average age of that team. Sheffield United coming in with a slightly older squad of 26.2 years old as their average age. Interestingly enough, the Sheffield United squad was actually the oldest in the Championship last season, so they've done quite the effort actually at reducing the average age of this squad here. They don't rank in the top tier, and not actually in their second to top tier. They've gone ahead and reduced that by quite some way. Iliman Ndiaye, definitely one of their youngsters who I'm looking at the moment with serious interest. When he's on form, the guy's absolute gold dust. I always associate Coventry with being quite a youthful team, but that's not actually the case. They're coming in with an average age of 26.3 years old. I think because of the players who I generally look towards when I'm watching Coventry are their younger assets. It actually goes under the radar a little bit how old the rest of that team actually is. They've got quite a few older heads within that group who will be dragging up the average age of that squad. Thinking of your Simon Moores, your Cal McFadzines, people like Martin Waghorn as well, Matty Godden, another one. Gary Rowett always tends to lean on those more experienced players, and that's applicable with Millwall's average age coming in at 26.5 years old. Don't get me wrong, Millwall have invested some of their time into some more youthful assets, obviously Zian Fleming being a more recent example of that, but looking throughout those, sort of quote-unquote reliable performers for Millwall, a lot of them are their more older, experienced heads. Then with an average age of 26.6 years old, we have Rotherham United, one of the older squads in the Championship. We are now getting towards that stage where these squads are ranking amongst the older heads. Will that experience be enough for Rotherham to go ahead and avoid the drop this season? I think they've only given minutes in the Championship to one teenager so far this season, and that's Norton Cruffy, who's currently on loan there. Into the 27 camp we go. We've then got Reading coming in with an average age of 27.1 years old, currently ranking as one of the oldest in the Championship. Now, their average age has absolutely skyrocketed over recent years compared to what it once was, and that is as a result of the current financial situation at the club due to the restrictions that were put on Reading as a team. In fact, the way in which they've only been able to hand out short-term deals to players, that will obviously incentivise more experienced pros to go ahead and drop in there. And looking at Reading's general track record over those recent transfer windows, it has been those older players that have been targeted that were sort of without a club who Reading were looking to offer that next chance to. And in the end, and so far this season, I think that's really played into their favour. Obviously, this can't be a long-term strategy for Reading, and I'm sure it won't be with the lifting of those financial restrictions, but they've had to sort of play the hand they've been dealt, and as a result of that, they currently do have one of the older squads in the league. Coming in next, we then have West Brom coming in with an average age of 27.1 years old. It is something that I think a manager like Carlos Corberán will be keen to go ahead and rectify fairly swiftly. I think that for too long now, West Brom have probably been a bit too over-reliant on some of those older heads who I think they probably will be looking to shift out. We already started to see the sort of start of that process maybe over the last transfer window, but also the general players that West Brom have been investing into have tended to be in that sort of mid to late 20s. After that, we then have Luton Town also coming in with an average age of 27.1 years old. It's an interesting one when you look throughout that Luton team. A lot of them currently, you'd probably say, are sort of in their peak in terms of being in and around their mid to late 20s, but they also have quite a few older heads who are dragging up the average age of that squad, most notably Cameron Jerome, who I think is the oldest man currently in that squad at 36 years old. Luton also one of few Championship clubs who I don't believe have given any minutes to any teenagers so far this season, which I thought was interesting. But coming in with by far the oldest squad in the Championship, we have Wigan Athletic with an average age of 28.3 years old, which is over a year older than any other team currently in the Championship. Now, Wigan had one of, I think, possibly the oldest squads in League One last season. I think that really played into their favour in terms of having that experience to go ahead and get over the line in the end. Players who had sort of been there, done that before within that squad as well. But what could be a potential downside to that fact is that it is a squad where you do look at a few of those in the Championship and think, okay, 1, maybe 2 more years and they'll probably be having to move them on. And I do think there is quite the job at Wigan to be done in terms of quite drastically lowering that average age of their squad as they continue to sort of try to re-solidify themselves as a Championship outfit. I thought that was really interesting though, and Wigan fans, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that in the comments down below. Summer transfer window wasn't overly busy for Wigan in terms of deals done. They got a bit more moving towards the end of the window, but were quite quiet on the transfer front in the end, and I'm sure that lowering the average age of the squad will be on the agenda at Wigan sooner rather than later. But as you can see on screen now, guys, that is each Championship club and where they currently rank in terms of the average age of their team. I'd like to hear from you guys. Are you happy with where your team ranks in this, or would you like to see a bit more experience added or a bit more youthfulness? Let me know down below. Apart from that, guys, that will now wrap it up for today's video. If you did go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like and do stick around and subscribe for some regular Championship content, and I'll see you all in the next one.